Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Analyzing Finance with Nick live stream. Today, we're going to be talking about AI and unemployment, or just the future of the labor market in the world of artificial intelligence. And this is going to be a global problem, and it's going to affect all kinds of work. Um, so example really this that I hear as a common misconception is that those who are in the blue collar and trades world are going to be immune to AI, but they are just maybe at most 3 to 5 years behind with the development of robotics. As I do with these live streams, I start off with an opening lecture about what I'm going to talk about, and this is going to be AI and unemployment. And then afterwards, I will go into Q&A. And if you want to ask me a question, feel free to leave in the comments. And I get asked a ton of questions. So if you want to make sure that yours gets answered, or you want me to answer it before I finish the lecture series, please leave a super chat. So with that out of the way, let's get started really with the my thoughts on AI in the labor market. Um, I really think that the AI impact is going to be a mix of net job destruction, but overall labor market restructuring. I mean, as a result of this, you're going to have a lot of roles that used to need a full time person to do them no longer need to be done by a single person, or you'll have what used to take, say, two or three people to do, you can do with only one more productive individual with the help of AI technology. And I think that's the more likely outcome. So instead of, say, for example, going from 10 lawyers to zero lawyers in a contract law practice or patent law practice, you might go from 10 lawyers to two, but each of those two lawyers can do as much as five did in the past. And the way this, the first impact on this is really how corporate structures are going to be changing. Like the typical corporate hierarchy was a classical pyramid shape where you had the bottom, which are the entry level people who did the bulk of the grunt work, whether these are the analysts at the investment bank, whether these are the retail employees at a major retail chain, whether these are just the people who engineers who do the construction engineering, or is it or the people working on the oil wells in like the energy industry. However, I think with AI, and this is particularly for more white shoe type high skilled labor such as coders, accountants, lawyers, um, business development professionals, etc., you are going to see a shape change from the pyramid to a diamond shape, where instead of having the bottom of the pyramid be where the most employees are, and it narrows its way up from junior level employees, middle management, senior management, ownership, C suite. And that's kind of the traditional corporate pyramid. But instead, you would have a diamond where you have very little employees at the bottom, if any. The middle management will be still there because it's going to be the middle management, not necessarily managing people, but managing robots and LLMs. And you'll probably need less middle management than when you had to actually manage people, but there will still be middle management to basically facilitate all of this. And then you'd have the C suite at the top, and that's the diamond shaped structure. Um, and so you have still the top decision makers, the capital allocators. You have the rainmakers, like the people who are the salespeople who bring in revenue for your company. Um, and then you'll have still, again, some management in the middle, but they will be hollowed out. And the bottom will be completely hollowed out, whether that's physical labor or white collar labor. It's just that the physical labor, like the blue collar people, construction, trades, etc., outside of edge cases, which you'll still need humans to handle the more higher risk and higher level of skill edge cases, but your routine level work in the manual side will be replaced by physical robots such as mobile Aloha and its evolution, Tesla's Optimus, etc. And that will be how a corporate hierarchy works. And so, what are the implications of this? One, it's entry level hiring is going down. I mean, you've seen this is the first time that like a college grad at 25 has a higher unemployment rate than non-college grad at 25. And you also are seeing this with just having the labor market being disproportionately hard for younger people to move up the ladder than it has been in the past. This is the early signs of this. And you see a lot of business owners who used to have to hire people are saying, why can't I just have a Claude bot do what I used to have the junior analyst do? The Claude bot cost me a fraction of it of the pay, and I don't have to deal with managing the emotions or the regulatory headaches of hiring a person or paying their salary. And this is a conversation I've had with several business owners, and stuff that I think about in terms of scaling my own firm is when does it make sense to actually hire versus trying to use technology to magnify my existing capabilities. I know, for example, with AI, is helped me be allowed to make 2 videos on this channel a week versus one in the past because of certain AI technologies have made me much more productive on the back end of the channel. So I can give you guys more original content directly. Um, so that is one example, really, of how this plays out. The entry level is most exposed, and it's going to start with hiring freezes versus layoffs. And now you are starting to see more layoffs, but I think the layoffs are more of a sign of economic disruption or potential weakness at these individual companies more than I would say AI being credited for it. Because if I'm a publicly traded company and I have to cut my costs somehow because my profits aren't as high as expected or my revenues aren't as high as expected, and then therefore my profits will be lower because my costs stay the same. I it's I'd rather say, hey, look, I'm laying off these people because I'm making the firm more efficient than AI versus saying I'm laying these people off because we don't have as much business and the company's not doing as well. What message is more appealing to investors, especially now that people, as the investor class, love anything AI? It's an obvious narrative choice. So I think this is more from hiring freezes than outright layoffs. Uh, and then the other thing is that the career ladder is going to break because of this. And if you say, for example, want to be like a future middle management or a future experienced professional in a given field, yet nobody really wants to hire you at the entry level because AI can do your job. What does this mean 5 to 10 years from now when a lot of the middle management is either retired or the senior management has retired and there's nobody to succeed them? This might be the longest term problem of all of this, is that you will still need people to guide the AI for, I think, at least the foreseeable future, or to manage edge cases or things that are too confidential or things that have too much um, financial skin in the game or require too much of a personal touch to be fully replaced by a machine. So people are going to be left more to higher stake scenario work or things that require certain security that cannot be done if you trust it to a cloud-based LLM. Like the example, like in software I think is an industry that is a lot of effects from AI. I think a lot of the software is more on the tertiary in terms of like risk to the firm, or less mission critical, or less like there's a need for like precision or safety, like HR automation software or like collaboration type software. That stuff is, or even some CRMs are more at risk of being disrupted and replaced by AI than software that's directly tied to things like payments or dealing with compliance of government regulations and et cetera, or cybersecurity. Like, and theoretically, you could have Claude or GPT or some AI model build you a cybersecurity solution, but I don't think major corporations are going to trust their firewalls to an AI that is relatively unproven. So that if you're in this software space, you want to go to the places where the damage from getting it wrong is way too high to trust to an LLM. Whereas the stuff that the damage of deferring to an AI is relatively minimal is the stuff that's going to be replaced the quickest. Um, so that is kind of one example of a sector that is going to be hit. Like the idea that coding is this like safe path for a career like it was in the 2010s, and you're going to have a nice, successful six-figure career with stock options is a thing of the past, unless if you're more early stage founder or of a newer company. Um, I think that's kind of one shift that we have to notice. And the other real implication of this is, other than the fact that we might have a whole class of professionals that just no longer exists because they weren't trained because of AI. And also, if you're a young person trying to develop, mentorship is usually one of the key ways that people do develop their skills in their careers. So if that's not being served by your immediate supervisors in the workplace, and this is also a work remote problem, people are going to have to find that through other ways through the community. Uh, and this also is the other implication if you're a young person, is that if there's a diamond shaped career path, um, the career path is going to be more of a choose your own adventure type thing versus some linear path. I know millennials particularly love this idea of a linear path to success and stability. You go to high school, get good grades, you go to college, you go study a somewhat useful major in college, and then you get the entry level job at the corporation and just move up the ladder into retirement and maybe switch jobs between competing firms in your niche industry along the way. But that's not really how the world is going to work anymore. Companies are not going to pay to train. They already were hesitant to pay to train before AI. Um, and you're going to now have to go and be more entrepreneurial in the way you built your career. Like I had to go through something similar when I graduated during the wake of the financial crisis from college, and a lot of the conventional hiring paths didn't um, show up and were not available to me because of how weak the financial services and investment industry was at the time. And so I kind of had to do is build up the entry level equivalent skills through my own entrepreneurial methods. And so then I got into the industry a few years out of school, but not quite as an entry level person, as somebody more um, skilled than a completely bottom person. And that's kind of what you might have to do. And I think that's not a bad approach, actually. You'll need to independently build up the skills and look at yourself more as a consultant or a business owner, in the sense that if you go into a company, you can't really just go and say, oh, I'm here because I'm willing to learn and um, I have energy, but nothing much else. You go into a company and say, hey, look, I've done some research about your industry. I've done some research on where I think my aptitude and my interest is. And this, by hiring me, is how within a certain period of time, I'll be able to help your top and or your bottom line. And that is the way to get around a lot of this. And you also are going to have to do more in person or direct kind of networking, because AIs are now being used to screen applications. There already was software to screen job applications when I was younger and still trying to go into the career path. And since I didn't go to a certain type of university, my resume was thrown in the trash often before people had a chance to talk to me back then. But I think the LMs will be even less forgiving than an HR manager who's programming software to screen certain search terms. So that's really, I think that you're going to have to just generally be, you don't have to be an entrepreneur or a business founder to have a career, but you have to think more in that way to see like what are the pain points that prospective employers have and what can you do that will actually help them with their underlying mission. Um, and so that's really, I think, one of the ways to how to manage this. Um, I think the bigger risk is really not unemployment for younger people, but it's the ambiguity of the path to getting into the workforce and the less traditional direct entry points into professional careers. It may cause people who are not as high agency to be less motivated to self-educate themselves in this way. And this will lead to a longer term problem is when a lot of the middle management is now C-suite or a lot of the C-suite is retired, there's not going to be anybody to do the middle management work unless if these same people want to do it all or AI gets so good that you never even need the middle management too. But I don't think that's really going to be the case. I think also the other thing that makes me less end of the world about AI is that you have demographic offsets to a certain degree. Labor force is growing very slowly around the world and is slowing down rapidly and may start to shrink due to a combination of years of low birth rates and an aging population. So a lot of the job destruction created by AI is going to be compensated by the fact there are less people to work, and a lot of the people who are not willing to embrace the technology are likely going to be the ones who are retiring or leaving the labor force. And so a lot of this will self-correct to a certain degree. Um, I the other thing too is you'll a lot of these retirees are still going to need the same goods and services as a working age person, but they will not be working. And so the level of demand will be relatively maintained while the supply of labor declines. Eventually, this will shift, and I think there's going to be a J curve in unemployment, and we might already be on the upper swing of the second part of the J. But that's the the combination. We already have also a problem with inefficiencies in general. Like a lot of the jobs in our economy are basically just places to put well-educated people who don't have any other place to go. You could see my video about why middle-class jobs are obsolete to a certain degree. I did about a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago now, that goes into more of this. But you already had a problem of oversupply of credentialed white collar workers, and AI is going to magnify that to a degree. And the thing is, I'm talking a lot about AI, white collar workers, and the ones who are at risk. Really, I mean, again, it's people whose jobs are take a high level of intelligence, but are relatively repetitive and rote. The examples would be coders. I think a lot of accounting and bookkeeping. I think graphic designers are at risk to a certain degree as well. I also think that you have lower level people in like architecture and law, investment banking, basically anything that was be perceived as grunt work. That is that the stuff that is most at risk here. So that's kind of my take on white collar work. And it's a result, this is going to have a negative wage pressure on white collar work because if the AI can do things for much cheaper, companies are not going to be chasing you unless if you are a star talent or directly tied to revenue, which is generally good career advice anyway, to be generally tied to revenue. But I think in the age of AI, I think it's extremely more important, because if you are a cost center, then companies are and management is going to try to find ways to use technology to eliminate that cost. So, um, yeah, the next one I'm going to talk about now is the blue collar side, because I don't think they're safe. Robotics is the same disruption potential for them, but it's just a little bit slower. Um, the robotics, I think, that are going to be able to do a lot of the trades will probably start to come in about 3 to 5 years. I think by the end of the decade is when ChatGPT first came out, is when I made my call. And based on the progress I've seen with robotics development, I think that's going to continue. And we're actually going to do a video where my colleague from Spearhead, Murphy, in our meetup in San Francisco that's coming up this weekend, is actually going to speak about the future of the robotics industry and what can we expect in terms of timeline for developments in this space, and what are the implications for individuals and investors as well. And I just posted a link if you are happen to be in Northern California and want to come to the meetup in San Francisco. Um, and then, so I got a little bit sidetracked there, but when it comes to robots, they will create the same diamond shape corporate structure, except for blue collar, where you would have basically the grunt work, or the part that, like, the residual human labor side of any contract or job, construction job or project, will be done with robots. And basically the general contractor and the foreman and the more middle level management will be what supervises and makes sure that everything goes smoothly, and then you'd have the owners at the top. And I think this is what will happen for blue collar professions. And there's a lot of implications for this too. One, there will be less demand for low skilled labor. Two, I think education will remain valuable, but maybe it'll be different than the conventional college structure, but it will still need to have some sort of post secondary education to figure out how to manage everything, because most jobs, both blue collar and white collar, are going to be either management or creative roles. Um, and so that's it's not going to be just go to trade school, be a plumber, and make six figures. You'll have to start a plumbing practice and buy plumbing robots and have them sent all across your town to do multiple jobs across your city. And all this is going to be very deflationary for um, manual labor jobs in particular, and construction. And the other thing is it will greatly change the politics of immigration. Like, if you think that anti-immigration sentiment is a issue now, or is a very big thing now, it is likely to skyrocket, because if you have to already compete with AI for jobs, you don't want to have to compete with people from other parts of the world coming to your country for jobs, as well as the AI for jobs. And, like, so I think that issues of labor shortages will no longer be an issue. And a lot of the reason why we even had a perceived labor shortages, because they weren't actually labor shortages. They were labor shortages of people willing to work for um, below cost of living, or below, like, the amount of effort and it took to get those extra skills. And now, instead of having to marginally lower costs through H-1Bs or other ways of bringing in cheap skilled labor or cheap unskilled labor, you can do that without having to skipping the people step and going to either robots or AI. So that's the my take on that. Is the other implication is that I think that I don't think open borders will ever be politically viable for an economic reason ever again. Um, and the Other thing too is with blue collar stuff, everything will be more capital intensive. Like the main jobs in the blue collar world will be from people who actually do or build the thing that they need to do, to either supervisors, machine operators, or technicians or maintenance. Like if you are pursuing the trades, I recommend working in or studying how to maintain advanced machinery or robotics, or edge cases where it's going to be hard for a conventional robot to access, like maybe repairing like telephone towers in the middle of nowhere versus learning how to do something that's fairly basic like plumbing, compare by comparison. um, that is where if you want to trade, you either need to niche max or focus on repairs, maintenance, and management of what is going to likely be an automated fleet of work. So, what are some other broad societal implications to all this? And how are people going to adjust in a world where you don't have corporate pyramids anymore and the traditional career ladders? Well, I think you're going to have is what I call the revival of the artisan class or the modern yeoman, which in the old days you had these farmers who were wealthy enough that they were able to not only feed their family but sell a decent amount of their excess cash crops to develop real capital for future generations and have a comfortable, for at least for their standards, middle class life. Or um, the other thing too is that you can also have is what they used to have like artisans, where people would make specialty things and it was more individualized and customized, versus the industrial revolution was shifted from people from being their own independent artisans to have commoditizing their skills into like a factory setting on an assembly line. This lowered costs and also lowered the cost of labor because you didn't need as much skill to do that than custom crafting something like an old time blacksmith. But I think the implication of a lot of this AI is that you're going to go back to the world where you have customizable individual artisan professionals, like the modern day version of like the blacksmith or the tanner or any of these other kind of skilled artisans, kind of like the people you would see at high end farmers markets, selling goods that, or an Etsy. um, you'll see more of that kind of thing replacing like mass produced commoditized things, um, at least in terms of the source of labor. Not, there'll still be mass production, but it will all be done by robots, and the only people who will be working in those factories will be the people who are the engineers, the technicians, and the maintenance people that needed to make sure everything is humming and to upgrade and always make it constantly more efficient. um, that's where I do agree with a lot of the trends that I think manufacturing is moving back to the US in a big way. But I don't think manufacturing employment, like the ideal was pre 1980, will ever come back because of the implications of all the technological developments I'm mentioning here. The only reason why manufacturing in the US is viable again after being unviable for 30 years was due to the combination of the US having some of the cheapest domestic energy sources in terms of natural gas, and the fact that we can use robots and AI to reduce the amount of labor, that the advantage that emerging market countries have in terms of labor costs is no longer really the competitive edge for manufacturing. The competitive edge for manufacturing is the combination of cheap energy and advanced technology. So but the opportunity really for Americans in this era of um, automated manufacturing is not working at the factory, but it's starting your own factory. Because the bright side, there is a silver lining to the commoditization of entry level labor, both in the blue and the white collar world, and that is that you as an individual have a lot more power to build a scalable business than you ever have. I've even experienced this in my own life, like growing up seeing my dad with his business in the 1990s. He needed a lot more people to do things that we take for granted today. Like this was no, everybody had to be called or on the phone directly or written letters. You couldn't do emails. You couldn't do online orders. There's no real like software is very primitive back then. And so as a result, you just needed a lot more people and you had to do a lot more physical in-person meetings for things too. And it means that your margin, your scale was limited just because of the inherent cost of getting things set up. Whereas today, or in my generation, when you had Web 2.0, Web 3.0, this emergence of a lot of these SaaS type businesses and software automating a lot of things pre AI, I would able to do the same. Like if I try to start my financial firm 30 years before, I would have needed a workforce probably 5 to 10 times the size that I would have now. And with AI, it will shrink that even further. So you're basically allowing the barriers to entry and for most businesses to be a lot lower. I mean, there'll be some exceptions, like certain things that require a lot of land or capex, whether that's starting a farm or starting a bank or starting an oil drilling company. Yeah, those are hard physical or financial capital restrictions. But for most businesses, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's a services business, you will be able to do it at a much lower cost point than in the past. And so you can get in and start your own manufacturing firm. You can start your own factory. And instead of having to hire a whole assembly line of workers, you can buy like a couple robots that will cost each less than a car. And like the people who have the creativity or the agency or the willingness to try to do things um, can go. And if you can't afford to buy robots, you can go into a more service-based business, and and that's even cheaper. You just need a few software subscriptions and like a few legal things to set up, and you're in business. So this is going to be a golden age of entrepreneurship coming up, and you will probably see a single family or maybe a couple families create multinational size corporations. So say for example, um, if I wanted to create a business selling analyzing finance with Nick branded coffee mugs and offer that to other content creators. I know there are firms who do this, but I'm just using an example theoretically. Instead of having to um, build out a whole team to get everything set up, I can use the scale of AI to help me look up all the regulatory things I need to comply to. So I can just talk to a lawyer and say, this is already know to need to get done, or even build basic drafts to reviews. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take any of this for legal advice or tax advice or any other kind of professional advice. Take a skilled professional. And then I could go in and have the AI build my website. I can have them make all of my design, all my inventory. I can have them send out in like cold emails to all the stores to see if I want them to carry my product, etc. And all I really need to do is just make sure that everything goes smoothly and there's no errors popping up. Um, so that's kind of the potential you have. And it's not just little kitschy things like that. You'll be able to become like a niche expert in one particular field, and you could maybe not have the time to do all of this yourself, but you can have maybe a few other people. This is why I think you'll see the revival of family businesses, because this can easily be done by like a husband and a wife and maybe a couple adult children running a company that generates 8, if not 9 figures in revenue. You will see a lot more of that today. And it's easy in terms of sounds simple, and it's easy in terms of maybe it's lower cost, but again, the market's a competitive place. So there will still be, you'll still have to put in effort to figure out where do you fit in this niche of the modern entrepreneurial world and how to stand out. But I think this is a great opportunity. And as a result, because of the emergence of like the modern yeoman and the modern artisan and a more entrepreneurial world, you're going to have the main way to build capital and wealth is going to shift from labor income to ownership income. It already has to a certain degree, but this is going to continue to magnify. So your wealth is not going to be built on just having like a high salary and saving that over the years. I mean, it's going to be built more by owning business assets or owning automated systems that help you leverage your existing capabilities to a much larger audience, and also controlling sources of distribution. Like, your value is going to be able to increase by being able to leverage technology to help a lot more people than you would if you just had to rely on yourself without them. And as a result, you'll probably have to change the tax structure in a way that capital is taxed more than labor, or property, physical property is taxed more than labor, because you can't really do it with financial capital, because people will simply move and capital will flee, because financial capital goes to where it's best treated. But you can do it with physical property. So I think you'll probably see higher property taxes, higher consumption taxes. This is stuff that's harder to evade and is kept within the national borders of a country, and is less at risk to capital flight. So let's just see how this plays out. You'll like this basically, as you'll see this develop, it will be step one is hiring freezes. Step two is compression for the middle management level. And then three is outright headcount reductions, mainly driven by retiree related attrition and not hiring people at the bottom end. And basically, your labor market will consist of people who control capital, professionals who have managed to figure out how to use AI and robotics to augment their existing skills, the entrepreneur, modern yeoman class, displaced people who either refuse to adapt or, unfortunately, in a profession that got disrupted too quickly for them to adapt. Those are kind of be the four kind of main post AI positions in the labor market. And a lot of people have commented on the whole idea that there's a gender dynamic to how the AI plays out. And I don't think it's really that simple, because I think that you have robotics more disrupting male dominated professions, especially the stuff that requires more physical capability. And you'll have AI disrupt a lot of more female dominated professions. And even robots will replace a lot of caregiving, such as like nurses or people caretakers for the elderly in their own homes. And that's the other implication for this too, is that the retirement home business is going to be severely disrupted as well, because with AI and robotics, the elderly won't have to leave their homes if they don't want to, because this technology will be able to help people stay independent deep into their 90s or later, hopefully. And however, you could see really just happen on the terms of like the cultural side is, I think you will have more incentive for marriage, I think, in a post AI world, because you will have the economics of having a family will be very different, because the cost of childcare continues to go up, but salaries are not going up proportionately with it. So you'll probably see more one income households with and a more gender agnostic decision making of whoever's the least productive person will be the one who's the primary caregiver. So that's probably another trend that will be a consequence of this. And this will also help with some of the employment issues, because if there is less demand for people, but the fewer jobs that will remain will likely be higher skilled, higher creative load, and higher paying. But there will be likely to be less of jobs overall, but the ones that do remain, again, I think are going to be in higher income. Uh, so that's kind of my take in general on this AI thing is that it's going to create diamond shaped pyramids, first in the white collar world. And it's already starting to happen as you've seen, like the gap between unemployed and non college grads, unemployed college grads narrow. And you will then have a more entrepreneurial and a more artisan based, professional base. And it will be separated on those who can use AI and robotics to leverage their existing capabilities versus those who cannot. And I think that agency and creativity will be valued a lot more. And what this means for recent grads or individuals who are trying to find careers in this world, um, automation is basically competing with just pure grunt work or just being willing to work long hours or being willing to work harder and being willing to learn. You need to come in as somebody who has a plan to either leverage AI or maybe you don't need AI, but you need to figure out with a plan when you meet with companies, how am I going to impact their top or bottom line in a way that is worth hiring you? And I think there could be some plus changes to this. Like I think a lot of the old ideas of like billable hours or like we're burning the midnight oil in the investment banking profession are going to become outdated because like if AI can make these things a lot more efficient, there's going to be no honor in just being willing to stay in an office longer than somebody else. And so I think hours will go down, but dollars per hour in general are going to go up across the board. Um, and so you have to figure out if your job's been disrupted by AI, where do you want to be? Do you want to be an operator who uses AI to increase their existing output? Do you want to be a revenue driver, whether that's working in sales or finding some other way to help drive the thing that generates income for your business? Do you want to become a hyper specialist, focus on high stakes, complex edge cases that are going to be difficult to replace with a robot? Or do you want to do the yeoman path where you build your own small business or family business or practice that you use AI to scale, but is still independent and customized in reflection of like your own personality? And players are going to emphasize usefulness and output. And I maybe will always kind of do this way when I was always trying to either look for um, hiring people, whether contractors, employees, interns, etc. I never really cared about how many hours you put into a project. It was always more just, can you get a certain thing done by a certain amount of time? If it takes you 5 hours, great. If it takes you 40 hours, fine. Like it doesn't, I think that output based pay is also going to be the future and performance based pay more than just paying for time. Um, and that's the other implication of all this. Um, and the world becomes more productive. Um, I would say, and it's also more volatile, the job market, and you can't really count on like the stable 40 years and the golden watch. And that's and I think that the mass unemployment side of things will be somewhat blunted by demographic change. I have one question somebody asked me. Um, what about the global South population? This is something I probably should have included that I'm going to talk about now before I go to Q&A, is the emerging market implication, because there's a very big difference in how this impacts developed economies versus emerging economies. And I talked about this in my video I did a few years ago on the economic future of Indonesia, which is a classic example of a country that's a real big loser from all of these trends. And you can click, there's the link to the video right there. And with in Indonesia hasn't moved up not high enough on the value chain, or their average income isn't enough that their domestic consumer society can fully replace the need to export. There's always this ladder where countries started as exporting natural resources and they moved up to exporting light manufactured goods, then heavier, more skilled manufactured goods, and then services, and then advanced to high education services like financial services or tech or things like that. And if the the older a country started this industrialization path, tends to be the more wealthier countries. Um, and there are some exceptions, like I think Singapore and Japan and South Korea were able to accelerate a lot of these processes. But the problem is it does take time and generations of shifting educational patterns to move up this ladder. And a lot of the emerging market countries are still at either stage one, two, or three. And if you have AI replacing the need to do white collar outsourcing, or um, the shifts in robotics and global manufacturing, that you can make things more domestically cheaper, and that the cheap labor of your country, which is the reason why people outsource to your stuff, is no longer an advantage, you have a real problem. This is where you might have real serious civil unrest and unemployment rates issues, or in these emerging countries where you have a relatively highly educated population, yet an underemployed population. That's the dangerous cocktail that leads to social unrest and rebellion. Like Egypt is a good example of this. They have a fairly well educated population, but they don't have enough high skilled jobs that pay well enough to justify it. And so as a result, democracy in a country like that, this just can't work because of the the impulse of the overeducated, underemployed causing trouble, whether politically or physically. And that's why you had things like the Arab Spring and things like that. And I think you're going to have this issue with a lot of countries in the world. I don't think it's going to really impact the West or some of the wealthier East Asian countries, because their population curve is significantly older and they're relying more on technology. Um, and when it comes to the what was I going to say? When it comes to population, that's the other thing, is that geopolitics and population size are not always correlated. Like you see, like a lot of these conventional geopolitical experts say, like, oh, you can tell what's going to be a future world power based on population size and whether they have a growing economy or not. And population size is an asset, and it's a sign you're going to be a strong country if the global technology level is converging, or is even fairly evenly distributed, like it was in the era of the internet, where you had intellectual property less safe than in the past and a more collaborative sharing world. You had from basically the 1990s to 2023, you had a convergence in the technological level of the most emerging, lowest developed countries to the United States. And now in the era of AI, that convergence, and robotics, that convergence is no longer convergence, but it's a divergence. And where like the most advanced countries have a severe technological advantage. And the last time we had a major era this is when you had this, was like the early modern period and the industrial revolution, where you had relatively small countries in Europe had disproportionate amount of geopolitical power over the rest of the world because they had a major advantage in terms of technology, whether that's manufacturing, medicine, organizational technologies, weapons technology, etc. And we're going to be in a world where this AI and robotics are going to be applied to things like military, technology, organization of societies, etc. And though the countries that are the most technologically advanced are going to be the most powerful countries in the world. And so you'll see surprisingly small countries that are going to be big geopolitical players. Examples could be places like the Netherlands, if they don't tax themselves into oblivion, Switzerland, Korea, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, um, like whereas like the U.S. but has the advantage of both a strong population and a strong technology. But if you have like the technological capability, and that's a significant advantage to other countries, you will have more geopolitical power. I mean, I think the U.S. and China have pretty strong technological capabilities, but a lot of these other middling and power emerging market countries do not, and they are all at risk in this post AI world. And now with that, let's get to Q&A. So please leave your questions in the comments. I'll try to get to all of them or as many as I can, but if you want to ensure that it gets answered, please leave in the super chat. But while I'm waiting for questions, I will have a few in-house announcements. First, we've expanded Analyzing Finance with Nick to other social platforms. I share I don't really put shorts on my YouTube feed because I don't really want to inundate you with a bunch of little clips of videos that I may have already had excerpt out of. So if you want to see like short form content, you can follow me on X or on Instagram. It's at AF with Nick for both of those, or LinkedIn as well. And then the other thing too is that the tour is going to keep on going. We had a great meetup in Seattle a few weeks ago, and my next official meetup speech is going to be this weekend in San Francisco, which will be on Saturday afternoon, in the kind of the Japantown area. I'd love to see the Bay Area people there. I'm also having a luncheon in Fresno for a small group of people tomorrow afternoon, in the Central Valley. I have about 2 spots left on that if you're interested in coming. And I'm also having a private dinner in Montecito on this Sunday, actually, which is by Santa Barbara if you're not familiar with Montecito. Here's the link to my X, by the way. If you want to interested in coming to the dinner in Montecito, I'm going to put a link to the application form where you've got to tell me a little bit more about yourself to see if you'd be a good fit. And then after that, the next meetup we're doing is Toronto. I'm going to Canada. It will be on Thursday, April 9th, followed by Boston on Saturday, April 11th. And then we're going to have New York on Tuesday, April 14th. They will all have private dinners after if you're interested in attending, as well as the main meetup. And then I'm going to Atlanta for my first visit to Atlanta. I've never been there before. On what's it called? The 23rd of April. And then I am going to Chicago on the 25th of April. And then our last stops before I take a few month break for the tour is I'm going to Dallas on April 30th. And then we're going to have a special 50 state celebration for me visiting all 50 states of this country in my lifetime in Kansas City, Kansas on the 3rd of May. If your city was not included and you want to vote on where we go, US or internationally, here's the form to do that. And if you just have any general questions for me, whether it's like consultation about your questions about your investments or life or anything like that, and you want to have a more direct conversation with me, here's my form to fill out to contact me. And then for those who also want to just be kept updated on events and videos and other things and want my recommended look playing list, check out my Substack. All right, so now that I've got all the housekeeping out of the way, let's go to questions. Do you feel obsolete? No, I do not feel obsolete at all. I think some stuff I used to do is probably now obsolete. And it is a recurring fear sometimes in my mind is like, what if AI completely replaces the wealth management industry? But a lot of what my business is determined on is more on human psychology, which human psychology and responding to situations in real time that I don't think can be easily replaced by an LLM. If ChatGPT was able to replace humans in terms of returns, you would have every hedge fund basically be out of business already. It would have shown if they didn't. I mean, could be a day where that happens, but I think a lot of the advantages in markets is not just pure analytical um, brain power. It's also a human element and also just the stake. Like, do you really want to trust if you have a sizable amount of money? Do you really trust a random algorithm in a black box to dictate your entire future? You'd probably, even if you do advocate for technology, you probably at least want an adult in the room to supervise it to make sure it doesn't go haywire. And I think that that's where I think the view is on that, like anything that's lost stake, whether it's say you're like a broker negotiating a big real estate or finance or M&A deal, whether you're a wealth manager managing millions, if not billions of dollars of assets, whether you're a doctor responsible for like life or death things. I don't think things with the high stakes are going to be quickly automated. It's going to be lower stakes things. So if you want to again protect yourself professionally, this is why I'm not worried about being obsolete, is you need to be a place where the stakes are high enough that a human is still warranted. Okay, thank you, KC Kool-Aid, for the super chat. How much financial support do parents owe their children? I see parents living beyond their means while their children take out student loans for college. Is this a dereliction of duty as a parent? Where do you draw the line? I mean, I might be biased because I feel like I think that what my parents provided to me should probably be the standard, but I will say it nonetheless. I feel like parents' responsibility is for taking care of all of your needs and setting you up for to be as successful as possible on your own for the first 18 years of your life for sure. If they have the financial means and can afford it, you should pay for your undergrad degree as well, for college and all the expenses associated with that. Like, I don't think that, like, if there's a one thing, if you just don't have the means and can't afford to send your kid to college, but I do think it is a dereliction of parental duty if you could afford to send your kid to college and you use that money to just vacation instead. I mean, I'm in complete agreement. I think that with graduate school, that's where the it gets a little murky because I'm just skeptical of the value proposition of graduate school, to be quite frank. Um, and if you and also a lot of this beyond if you're going to help people beyond college, it's more of a do you have the means to do it, and do you it's optional at that point. Like for example, if I had kids who I wanted them to live in my community and if I had the means to do it, I would help them with say like their weddings or with buying a house or giving them startup capital or a business. But the thing is if you have multiple kids, you need to be fair. You can't do promise one thing for one kid and not do the same for another. Or don't or if you expect your financial situation to oscillate one way or the other, you can't have inconsistency because that's what breeds resentment is when there's a perceived perception of favoritism for one of your children over another. But hopefully that answers your question. I think like generally after college, you should be on your own as an adult. Your parents can help you if they want to. And if you're down on your luck, I mean, it may be provide you a place to stay while you're rebuilding your life. But I don't really like the idea of parents giving their kids money for rent for apartments or subsidizing lifestyles beyond college. And the other thing too is if you do want to do that, it means you have power over them, and you have like the control element comes into it, which also can breed resentment. But that's my take on it. Would love to see your takes on LATAM, the Middle East, UK, France, Germany, maybe the EU as a block. Okay. Well, I already talked about in my video I did about Indonesia, um, where about how most emerging market countries will be impacted by a lot of this stuff. The video is still about 3 years old, but it's just as relevant today. In terms of the Middle East, I mean, they'll continue to be their whole fate is based on energy exports still. They're trying to diversify, but the fruits of that are mixed. I think Europe, their problem is that they are resisting embracing technology, and the combination of a society that's old, a society that's dependent on a welfare state, and a society that hates risk and prefers social harmony versus economic dynamism, it just can't compete. They're going to have a cultural and spiritual shift in the way they look at things if they're going to want to adapt. I think that Europe is badly needed of its own great awakening, um, but I have no idea when that will come. I thought it could come by now, given what's going on over there. I did a whole video about the EU a few years ago, um, and basically why I think that the European Union is at risk of like potentially being a third world continent, but that kind of goes into more of that. Um, Next, let's go. I'm going to scroll up and see some of these other questions. When is UBI going to come in? UBI is not going to come in. I did a debate with somebody about UBI about a year ago. If you want to go into my full case, and I also did a video which summarizes just why I think universal basic income is fundamentally a terrible idea, but the math just simply doesn't math. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. There's no you wouldn't, even if you wanted to supply every American in today's purchasing power $2,000 a month, which in 80% of this country is not enough to live off of as an individual. The government would be insolvent if you tried to do that. It's not going to happen. So I don't think UBI is really an option. Let's see. What are people going to do and how will pay their bills? As I said before, people are going to have to become more creative. People are going to have to more collaborate within their families to help each other out when somebody is struggling. You are going to have a more entrepreneurial society in general. That's kind of the implication of this. Good afternoon, Nick. When will the next meeting in SoCal be? Well, I'm having the dinner in Montecito on Sunday, but like in terms of Newport or LA and more speech, it will be sometime in the second half of the year. Probably not at least until August or September, or realistically, maybe October. I'm gonna be preoccupied with a few other things this summer that I really will not be available for meetups until then. Like the next meetup I plan on doing after my break, it will be probably in Denver in July. What is the minimum liquid net worth today that will likely keep an unemployed person in the game? What do you mean by that question? Like enough that they can retire off of? Yeah, I don't really. Nick, you need to look up city tutoring math. There's a professor, Alfred Cromwell, who made a video about your post about you. Yeah, I saw somebody comment about that on my post today. I never heard of this guy before it was mentioned to me, and I read some of the post and watched some of the video, and I think I don't really want to go into like the reaction business, or I don't really like to personally attack people because that's just not really what I do. I just think the only real thing I'm going to say is that I think he is ascribing some value set and motivations to me that may not be there. Like the video I talked about with escaping low trust is just explaining an economic reality. I'm not trying to make a value judgment on whether it's a right thing or not. But it is just that's just more. It's more of an explanatory video than I'm trying to make some sort of moral claim. Let's see. How can someone in tech protect their future interests when they don't know where they fit to hiring preferences? I mean, I think you're gonna tech. You have a lot more to worry about than demographic-based hiring preferences. You got to deal with the AI reality. I think you're worrying about the wrong thing. Um, let's see. Is it even worth it to work for big tech anymore? It just seems like you always got to worry about your job getting cut by a small rounding error in company profits. Well, I think it's worth it in the beginning of your career for networking purposes, to learn how a big company works to the inside and gain some useful real world experience, and just strategize for, and also give you some time, especially if you're young in your career, don't know what you want to do in the bigger picture, to figure out your longer term strategy. So yeah, I do think it is, especially if you're under 30 years old. Um, let's see. How about the accounting industry? Yeah, I think the accounting industry has room for disruptions. There'll be room for tax strategists and um, some auditors and some CPAs who help involve more complex situations. But AI can break down a very complex tax code and give a lot of answers. I don't think you'll get rid of professional accountants, CPAs entirely, but I think there'll be less of them. And I think the CPA business will be more independent practitioners than large multi-accountant firms. Let's see. Other questions here. How do people get BS jobs? Um, it's really just working in fields that are inefficient enough and are hard to have high switching costs enough that they can fit in, so like healthcare, education, government, really, etc. If the AI will eliminate the grunts and the only decision makers will remain, what will that mean for the majority of the population? I think the education system is going to have to reform to teach people how to be more independent decision makers. Um, let's see. Uh, so most CEOs have poor executive skills. No, I mean, I don't know, where did they get that idea from? Let's see. I feel like Nick wants us all to be like small business owners, which isn't so bad, but should every person need to be a small business owner to do well? What will happen to this country? I mean, this is not really a fault of the country. This is a fault of technological disruption, changing what is needed in society and what is not needed in society. And I don't think everybody needs to be a business owner, but if you want to be successful, you need to have more of a small business owner mindset, um, and have a more high agency mindset. I made foreman at my tree company. I don't know where to go from here. Pursue my undergrad, but if management is going to get cut by AI, what would be a good plan? Um, for more specific situations, I recommend you just contact me directly, because I can't really do general advice over YouTube. But it also depends how old you are and what do you want to do, get your undergrad in to do it. Like, so there's a lot of, and also, can you maintain your job while you're doing undergrad, or would you quit it? There's a lot of variables here that make it complicated. I generally am for getting undergrad as long as you have an applied plan of what you're going to do with it. That's my take on it. And um, and so you get your degree that gives you optionality, and you do it in a way that's cost efficient too. Um, and then you have to figure out basically what you're gonna where you're going to take it really from there. Like, I think a lot of the management stuff is not going to be completely automated. I think management is least likely to get caught because somebody has to manage all the robots and the AI. So that's where I would that those are my comments on that. Do you think insurance brokerages, auto, home, commercial, in the era of AI, easily automated? Well, I think insurance rates will likely go down in the rate of AI because there'll be less human error, and so there'll be less claims being filed. And also, AI will be allow these companies to be run more efficiently. So I think it's very deflationary for um, insurance. Let's see. Um, Thoughts on AI native ERPs? I don't know enough about them to say any thing worthwhile on this live stream. Um, let's see. Um, Victor, I did not get a message from you on the super chat because if you did, it would show up here and be flashing on me. So it's very hard for me to miss that. Um, as a wealth manager, are you concerned about wealth consolidation to fewer events, affecting your ability to find new clients over the long term? No, I am not, um, because like even the top 1% of Americans, that's a $12 million net worth approximately, which it's kind of crazy to see how wealthy really America is. Is that if you're sitting in a room, maybe this might not be completely accurate because wealth tends to congregate, but if you're sitting in a room, there's of 100 people, one of them is going to have a 10 million or more net worth statistically, which I mean, it actually makes it feel like it's more attainable to get there and that's the thing in general with retirement and getting to certain levels of wealth. It is it's more attainable than people think, and there's going to be a lot more emerging money, and there's also going to be a lot of the great wealth transfer and people inheriting wealth because a lot of wealth is concentrated higher in the age curve, and they're going to switch. And the other thing is that the concentration is not just a wealth thing. There's also going to be a concentration probably in the wealth management business because a lot of the independent practitioners are starting to age out of the profession. And so there will be, I think the opportunity set will maintain itself. That's my point. Um, let's see. Hey Nick, I'm a professional salesperson who sells warehouse automation robotics to enterprise companies. How do you think this professional play out in the future? I think you're in a great spot. Um, like you're selling something that people are interested in and are going to need. And I think there'll be more warehouses because there'll be more domestic manufacturing in the long run. And there will be more need to have automation as increased automation technology makes it impossible to compete without it. So, yeah, I think you're in a good position and you're in a play in a rainmaker role, so you're not at risk of getting automated as much yourself. Um, what would you do today if you're starting from scratch? No equity, no cash, like a new college grad. I mean, I thought about making a video about this topic because I thought it would be fairly um, interesting. But it, I mean, I would again try to figure out first of all, what do I want to do with my life? That's step one. Like if you don't have a plan or at least like a possible endpoint to guide yourself, you're just going to be wandering around aimlessly. Then next step two is I figure out once I look at what the traditional path is to get to that, and then figure out what parts of that are going to be disrupted. And I would try to get a job in a field, like in the field that I want to pursue, whatever my life goal is, for like, again, 2 to 5 years, learn the insides of it to figure out what I can do. And if getting a job is hard, I'd try to build a case studies or other sorts of tangible evidence that I can contribute right away, and I don't need to be trained a lot or at all. And I do a lot of self-education and front load that on top of whatever I need between what my degree offers me and what I need at the job, and present that as my pitch. Reach out to a lot of people. I'll have to use various network things. I'm gonna actually make a video about how to network in a way that is actually worthwhile, because I've made every mistake in the book when it comes to networking. And so that, and once I do that, then once I've built the experience in the job, then I can figure out what are the niches that I can fill to get that need to be filled, and I can start my own business in, and then I'd go for it and start my own business in that area. So that's what I would do today if I had to start over. Let's just say I was 22 and fresh out of college today. That's kind of what my game plan would be. Do you think we're going to see an increase in immigration of people in the U.S. due to rising cost of living and predatory corporate practices? I mean, I think you might see more retirees migrating because they didn't save enough and they can't. I think the run of the stock market the last 15 years allowed a lot of boomers to be able to afford to retire, but maybe Gen X, who may not have as much saved for retirement, might consider more relocations to emerging economies, or even European economies who have more developed hospital systems but much lower cost of living. I could see a world of that happening, but I think for younger people, I don't see a lot of immigration because the job and career opportunities in the rest of the world are a lot worse than the United States, both in terms of raw income and also in terms of like what you actually get after taxes and purchasing power. And also America, people take for granted that how accepting our culture is generally compared to other societies. And you try to move into another country and you're not that native ethnicity or don't speak that native language by birth, or you might not ever be accepted. And therefore you will be very limited in your career advancement opportunities, unless if you're working as like an expat for a multinational. Like, so I mean, you could maybe see a few more digital nomad type people, but that lifestyle is not sustainable if you want to have a family. It only works for like perma bachelors and particularly young men. So that is I don't really see a giant surge beyond the retiree demographic. Let's see. Do you think the S&P will finish in the red by the end of the year? I'm not going to talk about specific market predictions or anything like that. I don't really give investment advice or that kind of thing on a live stream. If you do want to talk to me about your portfolio or you have any specific questions on that, contact me directly instead. How can we realistically expect AI to automatically add value to the economy? Currently, AI seems to be useful for memes and cheating on papers. Well, you're wrong about that. AI does a lot of things. It's greatly increased the productivity of my business and this YouTube channel. And it used to be something that only like content creators and students were able to use. Like that's like ChatGPT, like the first version that came out to the audience like 2 years ago. But there's a lot to what's it called? There's a lot more that has advanced since then, and it's going to continue to advance. Will the Angels finish last in the AL West this year? I think they'll probably. I mean, they did have some signs of life at the end of last season, but they're still pretty bad. I'd expect them to finish 4th or 5th in the AL West. It's actually, they're going to be in New York the same time I will be in New York for the meetup, but I'm not going to have time to go to the Angels Yankees game because I have my meetup there. So that will be keeping me busy. And we'll also have a date night with my fiance the night before. So I won't be able to see them when I'm in New York. But yeah, that's probably a bad season for the Angels. Let's see. Would you take a pay cut if it meant you can hire someone at your firm at a reasonable salary? Um, yeah, I mean, if I can hire somebody that would the productivity of them added to my team would result in much better ability to scale and much greater profits in the future. Yeah, that's called growing a business. You pay yourself less distributions in the short term in exchange of the needed capital expenditures or hiring people needed to grow. But would I permanently take a pay cut to hire somebody? No. Businesses aren't really charities. They have to, like, if you're going to hire somebody, they need to add incremental value in the long run. Um, let's see. You see, are coming to Toronto in April. Yeah, I'm coming on April 9th, and I was interested in coming, but I understand how these meetups generally go down. Well, basically, the first like 30 minutes is like networking and meetup introduction, just mingling around and talking to everybody. Um, I usually give some buffer before the main speech because I know like rush hour traffic and other things. Sometimes people are late. And so then about 30 minutes in, I do a speech. Sometimes I have a second speaker. Like in San Francisco and Dallas, I will have second speakers. And so the opening speaker will do their speech, then Q&A, and then I'll do my speech, and then a little bit of a longer Q&A. And then after that Q&A, it's more mixing and mingling with the audience at the event. So it's kind of like a mix of like a prepared speech and like lecture series and a networking event. Um, I've had a blast at all of them, and most people who've gone, actually, almost everybody who's gone has really enjoyed being there. Um, if you ever do a meetup in the Austin, San Antonio area, go. I did one last April, and I might try to do one this fall in Austin, but it's to be determined. Um, I've noticed that the places that tend to have the best turnouts are the more like the mega cities. Um, like tend to, maybe it's just because of population, or West Coast. Like Seattle had a really good turnout too. Um, and I've kind of figured out that I'm probably going to have a more permanent rotation in the future when I do these meetups of like consistent cities that seems to be a good crowd. And but that'll be more to determine, and I'll always throw a few wild cards in depending on the vote. The other thing I want to ask you guys is that I want to do an international tour in 2027, mainly going to South America and Europe and maybe the Caribbean as well. And I want to figure out really how I do this in a way to what's a good way to test if I have enough demand to go to a city that's serious other than just a blank poll. Do I just have prepaid tickets without setting a hard date so that there's minimum demand, or like what, or like how would you think, how would I handle this? Because I'm going to go to a lot of these places, but the numbers I need for it to make sense logistically are much larger than in the US in terms of sizes of meetups. So I need to rearrange it a little bit differently. And also you have to do a lot more advanced planning when you're traveling longer distance versus me getting on like a flight, an hour flight to San Francisco or Scottsdale. So like, and the polls sometimes aren't reflective. Like some places that have relatively low votes in the polls, I've gotten very high real turnouts, and places that polled really well, I got really bad turnouts. So it's very, not really bad. Everybody's fairly good, but I know there's certain patterns of places, and I'm going to do a meetup, not a meetup, a YouTube video when the tour is done in May, a live stream about what I learned about America's demographic and economics, and what young people are doing, and a lot of other interesting insights I've gained from traveling across the country the last year and a half for the tour. Have you ever had a city where nobody showed up? I've had a city where I've had almost nobody show up. Um, that happened like once. Um, and like back when I first tried to do meetups before the channel got big, I tried doing when I was a smaller channel. I did have only my friends show up. So yeah, but it's most of the time I get a fairly good turnout. Um, how do you feel about subscriptions for already built in car features such as speakers or extra power? Or just as an additional $500 of access to the frunk and new Mustangs? I hate it. Um, I think it's like my car has some subscription that I need to maintain the ability to lock the car remotely through my phone or be able to see where it's parked. If so, like if I let's say like one of my family members drive it somewhere, and after like the first year of having the car, they turned off all these features unless if I paid a subscription. And yeah, it's a complete joke. I like if you're gonna buy the car, you shouldn't have to have subscriptions for fairly basic features. Um, just raise the price of the car if the economics don't work that way. Like it's that's yeah, that's kind of my take on that. Let's see. I'm gonna scroll up and see if I have any more. What do you think of sales on tax on AI revenue to pay for UBI retraining? Um, it's kind of hard to quantify what is AI revenue. That's the problem with that, James. Um, like, is it AI revenue if it's solely just a company that provides turnkey AI solutions to replace a job, or is it that any business that uses AI to make themselves a little more efficient, that's a tax on AI? That's AI revenue now. So like that, I think that's kind of the difficult thing. I think the better thing would to do is you would replace income tax with sales tax and property taxes. Um, and if you want to make it less regressive, you can just like exclude necessities like food and heating and rents. But um, that's kind of my take on that. All right. I'm just scrolling for questions here. Do you think yeah, I can't really find it. Let me just see. It just kind of all blends in a lot of these comments. So if I missed your question, I'm sorry. It's just let's see. When will you be in San Francisco? It's going to be on Saturday. When I'll be in San Francisco. What is your take on the population decline and how that will affect the future economy? I mean, in theory, the population decline should be a net positive for the economy because it means thank you for the super chat, casual economist, because it should mean that you have more supply for less amount of people, which means you have more wealth per person. And especially since in the world of AI and robotics, you'll be able to make a lot more stuff without necessarily having more inputs in terms of human capital and labor. The only problem is that our entire government and tax structure and social welfare system is built on a pyramid for population. And you are getting a more hourglass for population. I don't think it's going to ultimately become a diamond shape in the long run. I think it will ultimately be an hourglass for the population pyramid in the long run because you'll have certain generations who can't afford to have kids due to economic circumstances. But when um, the cost of living in the world gets less competitive because of years of low birth rates and general prosperity increasing due to technological innovation, birth rates will go back up accordingly. But it stuck to being the sandwich generation of that moment, and the public finances is why it's not um, it's not an ideal scenario. But the solution to that is we shouldn't have ever had pay as you go, um, social welfare safety nets, and the government needs to have to step down on its role of being a caretaker for society. That's What is your take on rural towns offering incentives for remote workers to move in their towns? Um, there's two problems with it. Let's just say you're a rural town and you pay a remote worker $10,000 to move to your town. First of all, the um, the cost um, of moving is going to be a sizable amount of money, unless if you're just some guy who lives out of a suitcase. But even then, you got to probably have to pay for a flight at least, or the road trip to get there. So let's say you're netting only after this $10,000. Say, hey, I'm back. Sorry, like I think my internet went out randomly, but yeah, I'm back. Um, so the rural town thing. So let's just say it cost you $1,500 just to get there. And yeah, thank you for the sticker, BMX. Um, and so, what was I gonna say? Then you have $8,500 left, and that's not counting again furniture or moving or anything else like that. And second, is it worth getting like a four-figure sum to completely uproot your life and like get rid of your community, get rid of your family, probably live to a place that has less to do than where you're from? It usually doesn't make sense for the individual to do it, and for the government to do it. How long does this person have to stay there? Let's just say it's like a 1 year minimum that you have to stay there, or a 2 year minimum. This person gets paid $100,000 a year, um, and the state income tax there is 5%. So you break even if they stay at least 2 years. So you need to bet on them wanting to stay longer than that for this to make sense for you financially. Probably if you count time value of money, it's probably 3 or 4 years. And you need to provide enough infrastructure or reasons for somebody to want to stay in your community. Like, that's the problem. Like, the places that offer these are often places that I wouldn't want to live in. Like, the ones I've seen are Tulsa, Oklahoma, and West Virginia. I mean, there are some people who find those to be perfectly nice places to live, but I think a lot of the professional classes would get bored living in those places, or just don't have an interest of uprooting their entire family and social life to move to those places. Um, yeah. So it really, I mean, again, don't have much experience with either one of those states. I've been to only Harper's Ferry in West Virginia. And then for Oklahoma, I've gone to a Sooners football game in Norman and to Oklahoma City is my experience. And I think a town called Ardmore I had to stop by on the way back to Dallas. Um, but nevertheless, that I just think that they're not bad ideas in theory, but I just don't. I could see why they haven't really been adopted very well. It would work well. You would have to build a whole town around it with a lot of cool amenities and things to do. You can maybe build like a family colony, like you build like tract developments with a bunch of new nice single family homes and maybe like a theme park or like some unique draw to bring it in, or you modernize all your hiking trails or build a ski resort if it's mountainous or whatever. You just got to create it so it's a place that people would want to vacation to. And it's something that people want to vacation to. There's probably some people who fall in love with it and want to live there. Um, I went to Harper's Ferry because I wanted to go see the state of West Virginia, and I like history, and so I've heard it's a nice place to see for that. And it was on a road. I was driving from Philadelphia to DC, and it was kind of the closest point that I can go to West Virginia with the minimum amount of detour from my end destination. So that's why I picked Harper's Ferry. Will you respond to Alfred Cromwell? I already did earlier in this live stream, but I'm not going to get into personal attacks or things like that. That's not a reaction videos. That's not really what we do at the current state of this channel. Do you use AI for your daily work? Yes, I use it a lot. It has made me a lot more productive. I've used it to improve the quality of this YouTube channel. I've used it for some of my thumbnails. I know some of you guys hate it. Other you guys like it and it gets higher click-through rates. So it's kind of sometimes it makes more sense for me to make thumbnails myself. Other times it makes sense to use AI. It really depends on the topic. Yeah. And so that is I've used it for other post-production related things for this YouTube channel. I've used it to help improve my research process for my wealth management firm. And yeah, there's a lot of, and I'm looking for more way, and I made it to optimize a lot of the stuff that would otherwise be busy work. And it's made me a lot more productive. And I need all the productivity I have, as my schedule has been super busy when I'm trying to grow my main business, do this YouTube channel, go on the tour and see all you guys, and then planning a wedding. So I've been overwhelmed in terms of time lately. Let's see. What's it called? You go back and rewind. Just my general idea on his reacts that he's implying that I'm making certain value judgments when I'm just trying, in one of my recent videos, when I'm just trying to explain like economic reality. I'm not trying to say that it's not what you ought or what you should, but it is what is. And I think my statement of what is what he is thinking is what I'm saying is what ought or what should be. Let's see. How would AI driven employment and higher inflation expectations affect the economy? Would the Fed be involved? I mean, I think that AI would be deflationary on the net for sure. I think that the wars and the shortages and the tariffs, I think, are not really monetary policy things. And it would be a mistake to build monetary policy around short-term, relatively political factors. But yeah, I don't really think the Fed is going to be involved in driving this. I think anything on the margin, it means interest rates might be a little bit lower because inflation would be a little bit lower, but real rates will probably be higher. Because it also depends how the government responds. If the government tries to respond by having more reckless fiscal policy, then interest rates might have to stay high if the government is spending too much and causing an inflationary impulse to counter the deflationary impulse of AI. So, yeah. Let's see. What's your opinion on private versus public colleges? It generally makes more sense to go to the top public schools, unless if it's a school in like the U.S. News top 10 to 15. Like for those private schools, like the Ivy League, Stanford, MITs of the world, Vanderbilt, Duke, Northwestern, yeah, it still makes sense to go to a private school. But otherwise, the cost benefit in terms of a financial perspective of public schools generally make more sense for college. I'm generally anti-public school K through 12, but I talked about that in my education reform live stream I did back in January. So you want my whole thoughts on really just the entire education system? I did about like a 3-hour live stream going into all of that back in January. Yeah, so let's see. if the GCC is busy fixing their economies after the war, will the lack of funding of AI built out in the West have an impact on the projections already in place? I don't think that. I mean, I think they are investors on the margin, but there's enough capital from U.S. tech companies and other sources, both domestically here in America and globally, to fill the gap if the GCC countries stop investing in AI startups and technology. So I think the world will be fine. It, so I don't think it may lower the valuations a little bit because there might be more, the remaining bidders might be a little bit more price sensitive, but if the capital is needed, they'll find a way to get it. It just might be more expensive. Thoughts on raise in the Army enlistment age? What, like the draft age, if there was one going from like 18 to 21? Is that what you're asking? I mean, in the age of a more AI and robotic and unmanned aerial vehicle drone type driven military, like you're not going to win wars based on raw amounts of boots on the ground. So I don't really think the idea of a draft is ever going to come back. So let's see. I think that if the raise of enlistment age, there might be some physical fitness and mental health issues that have lowered the population. And just lower birth rates means there's less younger people who can serve in the military if needed. I mean, if people want to volunteer in the military at an older age, what's to stop them from offering it, as long as they actually have a role that can be put to use? I don't think it's the sign of anything nefarious going on in the future or any future escalation of any geopolitical conflict, if that's what you're implying. Let's see, next question. And seeing back on the whole what's it called, city tutoring math doing reaction video, that's the thing I've noticed since the channel broke 100K. People are starting to do reaction videos of me, where that really wasn't a thing prior. There may be one live streamer who did it when I was smaller, and he knows who I am and I know who he is. So you're watching. But otherwise it was, that's kind of a interesting thing. And I mean, and at least they've all been respectful. They haven't taken any low blows yet. And that's really all I can expect. Not everybody's going to agree with me, but as long as you keep it civil, I'm fine with reaction videos. Let's see. I lost all of the questions that were in the roll before my video went down. So if you want to ask anything else, feel free to ask that comment now. And if you asked earlier, please put it in now, because I lost all the older questions. Okay, how do we prevent choke points like the Strait of Hormuz from happening in the future? You build pipelines around it and you create redundancies so that you don't have these choke points. And a lot of people didn't want to do that because it's expensive, and it's also, the neighboring countries might not be geopolitically stable or cooperative to it, but that's why you have to build workarounds. It's and update the infrastructure accordingly to any, so that like another example would be like the Strait of Malacca. Like you build either another canal a little bit further to the north so that the energy can get through in case of that choke point is cut off, or you build land pipelines. So it's adapting and revising the infrastructure to build workarounds is the answer to that question. Thanks for your work. Is there one topic you missed or were off the mark on? Like for a video I've made, I'd have to go back through all of my archives. There probably is something that if I look back at it, was probably wrong about or incorrect, but I would have to I don't remember off the top of my head, to be quite honest. Um, I live in Canada. There's a lot of reserves in Alberta. Is there a lobby to not build out pipelines? Yeah, it's the whole Canadian environmentalist lobby and the First Nations related lobby in British Columbia. Like, and then there's also the anti-Keystone pipeline sentiment among environmentalists in the United States. So it's mainly environmental politics is what's preventing the pipelines in Alberta. Um, and that's my take on that. How do you know if someone isn't cut out for wealth management or financial planning? Um, it depends. Do you have an interest or a genuine aptitude for the markets, or are you trying to do it just to make money? If it's the latter, you're probably not going to have the endurance or stamina to last, because a lot of this business is just staying in business long enough to prove you're not a fly by night and that you can build resilient portfolios. Um, like a lot, it's like pushing a snowball at the beginning. It's very small and it seems like the progress you're making is nothing. But then as you keep going, it'll be more, and the dividends on your efforts will become more and more visible. But I think I'm going to do about 15 more minutes of questions before I head off this live stream, because I actually do want to record a video before I go to bed tonight that I'm probably going to talk about how your financial investment philosophy should change over time at different levels of wealth and savings. And the other topic I want to ask you guys about is, how would you feel if I made a multi-part series on the history of the Federal Reserve Bank? Would that be interesting to you, or would that be boring and you just want more social class commentary? Um, like I would, this is something I feel like I want to make, because I feel like the way that the Fed is taught or presented to the general public is very inaccurate. It's either center left, like technocratic sycophants who say that the Fed is just doing its best and they generally are right and there's nothing wrong with them, or it's conspiracy theorists who believe that the Fed is like a blood-sucking leech on society and can do no right. And the answer really is neither. I do have some anti-central bank bias, but it's not to the degree that it's the conspiracy theory people push. And I feel like that the narrative is on either side is rather poorly done, and there actually are real hard trade-offs. There are the drawbacks of central banking are obvious, but there are some actual benefits to central banking that people don't think about. It's kind of like my liberal international order, where before I did the research, I had a very hard anti-interventionist stance on foreign policy, and I still kind of lean that way. But then after looking at the international order and what like American intervention has actually done to impact the quality of my life directly, it kind of made me have a more nuanced view of it. And it's the same with kind of the Fed. The more you know about this stuff, and I know you think about and you try to think about the real like trade-offs, the more it makes you think about it. So thank you for the super chat. Do a deep dive into the Fed. Yeah. So that's why was it made in secret? I will have to talk about that. I've read The Creature of Jekyll Island, so I know all about the secrecy and some of the shadiness involved in the creation of the Fed. So yeah, I'll have to save that for the documentary. I'm still reading some books and on both sides of this to get some more in-depth color than you would find on a Wikipedia page, or just from my own experience working in markets. You have to learn a lot about the Fed, but that was more recent Fed history. I need to learn more about like the pre-1970s Fed history, which is not really discussed that much. And so what mistakes did I make while networking? I've made pretty much every one in the book. Like one, I would go to events that I didn't have any genuine interest or affinity for, just to hope to meet people who could be useful to me. You also made the old mistake of immediately handing out business cards to people without trying to learn more about them. I'm gonna do a whole video about how to network your way into a higher social class, where I will go into more details about how I would approach networking if I started it from today. Um, so yeah, well, healing arts like massage, therapy, facials, and their managers. I mean, I think that human massages and like therapy and all that will still be a thing, but it will be like a premium price point. Like I think the mass market versions of those will be replaced by machines or AI. It'll become a higher end market thing, because I think like a large chunk, probably like half the people who would do the machine one for a fraction of the price for a lot of these things. And you're already seeing a problem with people using ChatGPT as a de facto therapist already. Um, but yeah, there'll still be a market for it, but it might be a smaller market. Um, can you talk about how full automation is impossible because there will be no demand from generate revenue? I mean, I think Solo's law kind of applies here. Supply will make its own demand. Like if people can't afford things, prices will go down to a level until people can't afford them. Um, so yeah, that's kind of, I'm not really worried about people running out of money. And you also, over half of the consumption in the pre-AI world was by the top 10% of income earners anyway. So like that's the other thing. Um, is New Orleans worth it for a weekend trip? Yeah, I would say so. And I'm somebody who doesn't drink alcohol or not much of a partier. And I went to New Orleans for a weekend trip a few years ago, and it's cool to see because it's kind of like this historical artifact that is hard to find elsewhere in the United States, like the remnants of like the old French America, like a mix of the South and modern society all in one. It's got a very unique culture. It's got very good food, and the prices for the restaurants are very reasonable compared to, say, a place like California. And you can go out on like the airboats and see like alligators, and there's good fishing around there, I think, too. But um, it's also kind of a sign of like classic urban decay. So it's kind of sad at the same time. I, I, that's kind of my take on New Orleans. I mean, I think 2 days there is enough, honestly. And I think I'd go back mainly to show my future wife because she's never been. But apart from that, I don't, unless if a lot of people want me to show up, like if there's a big Louisiana analyzing finance with Nick community who wants to help me set up a really cool event there, maybe that might be the other reason to go back. What is your third favorite marine mammal? Well, how do you know what number one and number two are? So, um, yeah, I have to think about what my third one is. I know what number one is. My favorite marine mammal is an orca whale. Um, Number two, maybe a California sea lion. I Number three, I have no idea. It's probably some kind of whale. I don't. I have to think about it. Um, or maybe a dolphin. What is your inspiration for the series debunking the doomer? Well, I used to be kind of a doomer myself, particularly in my early 20s and my college years, because the financial crisis happened, and it seemed like a lot of the doomers were seemed very right at that time. And I had a very I had a very tough life from a personal level between the ages of 13 to 19, and then also my mid 20s were kind of a down portion of my life for personal reasons. And so I had, and also, and like my career kind of was a little kind of sputtered a little bit at the beginning because of the financial crisis. So I was in a very doomer position. But as I got older and I navigated my way through the world, I saw a lot of these doomer predictions not come true. And I was like, hey, wait. how look at these doomers, they made all these claims and none of them really came out to be what they said they were. And then on top of that, I kind of just realized the world is not such a bad place. And I realized also having a doomer like attitude in the world was very counterproductive for my life and probably hurt me more than it helped. And I don't want people to have to go through the same thing I went through. I actually did a video where I fully explain this called Why I Am No Longer a Doomer. Where I went into the details of like why I used to have a more doomer philosophy in life and now I don't. So yeah, it's called Why It's Time to Quit Being a Doomer. I'm going to share it with you guys here in this chat because it's very relevant. So yeah, and I don't think it's abnormal for young men to have a doomer phase in their teens or early 20s. Just the way our society is structured. What about massage therapists and facialists? We already just answered that question. I mean, again, I think they'll have a smaller market, but they'll still have a market. Thoughts on US cities that will thrive in the next decades? What about Atlanta? I think I'll go into this in my live stream I do about the tour, but generally look for places that have relatively high wages, high percentages of college educated people, and affordable housing. Those are the places that are likely going to have a lot of growth. Also, places that have more favorable tax and regulatory environments that will cause businesses from other places. So I think Atlanta has, I think it's the highest wages relative to cost of living of any major metropolitan area. So I'm pretty constructive on Atlanta until their politics fully turns it over and sabotages them. But that's a 10 to 20 year problem. That's not a now problem. I think that other cities that I'm bullish on would be like the Research Triangle in North Carolina and Charlotte. And I think, again, next 20 years, it's smooth sailing, but I think it's going to become a super blue state over that time. And it's going to impact its politics to kind of kill the golden goose, just like I view Georgia. Miami and South Florida, particularly like Palm Beach County, I'm pretty bullish on. I don't think it will quite be the next Wall Street, but you'll see more money. Dallas is another city that I'm very bullish on. A lot of companies that used to be based out of LA are relocating permanently to Dallas, and its central location and its space to expand outward is a lot of potential. And the climate isn't really severely limited. And I don't think the political risk of it turning is as bad either. And I would say I'm bullish. Columbus, Ohio would be a place I'm fairly bullish on. I think Chicago, I'm bullish on long term. I think their politics is going to start to turn over once their pension crisis fully blows out. That's what I'm going to speak about when I'm in Chicago, is the America's pension crisis and what the impact of that is. But I think I think Minneapolis is something that's potential, but local issues are kind of holding it back right now. I would say I'm not bullish on DC, actually. That's not a place. I think longer term, like 20 plus years, I'm bullish on California, but we're going through a turnaround phase right now. I think California is going to hit rock bottom in the next few years. And I think California will ascend again. It's just a matter of when. Yeah, Nashville, I think, is another place, but I think Nashville's already kind of growing. The problem with Nashville is like they don't really have any major multinationals other than HCA there. And Memphis has a crime problem. That's the main issue with Memphis. If they could clean up their crime problem, I think Memphis has a lot of potential too. But all those river delta, like the that the advent of trucking and that it really hurt the Mississippi River Delta cities, whether it's St. Louis or um, like Western Illinois, Eastern Iowa, Memphis, New Orleans. I don't really see what would be the economic driver for those places' recovery. I think if Tennessee, I think Nashville is in much better situation. Um, yeah, that's and then also the Mountain West, places like Bozeman, Montana, Boise, Idaho, Wyoming. I'm pretty constructive. I think the Mountain West, and then Denver, from a real estate perspective, I think I'm pretty constructive on. Maybe not in terms of like the overall economy, but um, yeah, those are kind of my takes. Um, yeah, so Northwest Arkansas is like a single company town. That's my problem. It's Walmart, and I mean, you're basically betting on Walmart. It needs to be more diversified. Let's see. Best two city trip vacation in Europe for 8 to 9 days besides Italy. Um, do you want to do a road trip, or do you want to do only two cities or multiple? Like, I like Switzerland, honestly. You can go to Zurich and to Bern, or like any of the small Swiss villages. There's That's a really fun one. If you're going to do another committed to two cities, you can also do, if you want a more contrasting, like Vienna and Budapest, um, where you're kind of going through both sides of the historical Iron Curtain, but they also have a linked history as being like the joint power centers of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I think another one you could do is like a Spanish two city tour, whether that's Barcelona and Madrid, or like Madrid and like Malaga area slash Marbella. I probably prefer that one. I think Barcelona was overrated, to be quite honest. Or you can do like Lisbon and Madrid if you want to do both countries in Iberia. And you could also do London and Paris, or like Nice slash Monaco, the French Riviera, and Paris, and just do like a France trip. But yeah, or you can do like Paris and Bruges in Belgium. I think Brussels you can skip, to be quite honest. So yeah, there's a lot of different combinations that you can go through if you want to do something a little bit different than Italy. Um, why do you think California will bounce back after its inevitable fall? There's a lot of reasons why, and I did a video with for you guys who are older fans of the channel. I don't know if you guys remember Chris Street. If you do, um, what's it called? Leave a comment. But I used to have him a lot on my show, and I'm going to have him come back on the channel sometime this summer. He's a former treasurer of Orange County and kind of knows a lot about the financial side of California. And I think that California has a lot of things that will. Here's the video I talked with him specifically most recently about California shortly, I think after the 2024 election. And my take on is that one is California is like the center of Trans-Pacific trade, and that will continue to be an important part of the global economy, even if it's not as big as it was at its peak pre-tariff. It will still be something that will support California. California has a wealth of natural resources. It's the number one produce growing region in the United States. It's got a lot of oil that's not allowed to be tapped because of environmental regulations, but they also have a lot of rare earth minerals in California. California is a place that has a very entrepreneurial culture, and the combination of the good weather and the relative tolerance for business failure attracts a lot of smart, ambitious young people who want to build businesses and make things happen. It's California, like, has gone as far as it has despite its politics trying to sabotage itself. So imagine if you have politics that simply doesn't try to sabotage the state with all of the resources and potential it has. California should be the most prosperous place in America, and the reason why it's not is a national embarrassment, to be quite honest. Um, and yeah, like, and you could see examples of it. There are still corners of California that are very successful and well run, such as where I live in Orange County. So the potential is there. It's just it's mismanagement, and I think once it has like a financial restructuring that forces a political realignment, it will come back. Um, yeah, it's it's always um, and also many California is, despite all this, is still the fourth biggest hub of manufacturing in the United States, and yeah, it's also and it's a strategic location. I think that really helps it a lot too. Um, is it true you can't technically own property in Irvine? No, you can buy a house in Irvine. Uh, let's see. Um, you you should do a videos on the history of nations, like the war economies or Singapore's rise to high income. I tried to do that. I did this playlist about economic booms and whether it was like the US in the 90s or Britain in the 90s or like the US in the 80s and like what made those times successful, because everybody likes to talk about bad economics. I want to talk about times that worked. And here's like the example of the one I did on the UK and the links. But um it wasn't very you guys it did people didn't really care that much about that topic. I guess people only want to hear bad news on YouTube. I might try to go back to that because I thought about making a video about the 50s in the US or the 80s in Japan. I thought it'd be another interesting one um, about these booms, like, or maybe like fake booms, like the 2000s was kind of a fake boom, I think, in America, or the 2010s. And I did recently kind of about the current one in my speech in Arizona. I think we're not in a golden age right now, but we're definitely in a silver age, a relatively good people obviously being left behind. And it's also a silver age because the people who are winning from the silver age are mostly people with silver hair. So, what's there to do in Washington D.C. as somebody in Canada looking to visit in the summer? Do you care about American history? If the answer is no, you'll be bored in DC. The thing to do in DC is to see monuments. Um, and all the museums, Smithsonian Museum, some of the nicest museums in the world. There are all the national monuments of all different kinds of things commemorated. You can see all the buildings where our government does things. It's mainly a history junkies kind of place. So if you like American history, you'll like DC as a tourist perspective. I feel like DC is a great city as a tourist. I wouldn't want to live there personally, but I like visiting it. And I had a great meetup last year in DC, and maybe I'll try to do one after the midterm elections. Um, let's see. What was I going to say? How does California fare with reduced water supply? Um, I would say water supply issues in the modern developed economies are a political problem, not an economic problem. Like droughts are caused by a lack of political will to solve them. If if California really ran out of water, they would build more infrastructure. We haven't built a new reservoir or a new dam in California in almost 50 years. That's like the population doubling over that period of time. So, like, you can build more water infrastructure and you can build desal. We have built some desalination plants, but they've either been throttled or not allowed to run because of environmentalist concerns blocking them being implemented and used. Like if the water shortages were a real threat, all these political barriers to fixing the problem would be going away and there wouldn't be a water problem anymore. Um, I think in general, with countries above a certain level of technological development, if there's a shortage of something, and usually it's a political driven shortage, or the market will fix it in the long run. Um, and if it doesn't fix in the long run, it's because there's a political barrier that is preventing it from being fixed in the long run. That explains housing shortages. That explains water shortages. That explains healthcare shortages of doctors. Those are all political problems. Um, is it practical to run a wealth management firm passively without much owner involvement? No, not really. At least I don't think it is. I mean, you have to even if you can hire managers, but a lot of the reason why your clients are your clients is because they want to work with your team specifically and you. But you can, but at that point, why would you run it passively versus just selling the practice and then running your own family office? Um, that's um, that's kind of my take on that. Let's see. Um, other questions that I have. I'm gonna just before I take more questions, I'm just gonna for those who are late, just give reminders of how to be in touch with me outside of this live streams. There's my Substack. Um, Opinion of the corporate slot bowl. I mean, if are you talking about like restaurants that have basically just like these standardized bowls that they're very common at the bottom of office buildings? Is that what you're referring to? But yeah, if you want to be like in touch with me, you can follow me on Substack. It's where you'll get my reading list and also updates on events and videos and other things. If you have specific questions you'd like to talk to me about, whether it's wealth management or investment related or anything else, you can reach out for a consultation. I'm also doing the tour across the country where you can either come to my main events or apply to what's it called? Um, the private dinners that are also coming. So we have private dinners with usually about, I don't know, 6 to 10 people, but it's more like intimate private discussion of things that beyond like the actual meetups, and they usually happen shortly after the meetups. We're having a luncheon tomorrow in Fresno. I'm going to be in San Francisco on what's it called on Saturday. I'll be have a dinner in Montecito. This is in the Santa Barbara area on Sunday. And then I'll be in Toronto after an Easter break on Thursday, April 9th. I'll be in Boston on the 11th, New York on the 14th, Atlanta on the 23rd, Chicago on the 25th, and then last but not least, Dallas on the 30th. But with Dallas, the dinner is the night before. What are your thoughts on high-speed rail in California? I mean, it was the biggest political government boondoggle in the history of state government in America. Like, they spent billions of dollars to build maybe a couple hundred yards of track. I know because I've done that drive through the city that the piece of the track is built and the concrete bridge, and it's like a visual representation of graft. It's just not viable. Like air travel is just way cheaper and more convenient than high speed rail would be in California. Like our cities are just, and in the United States, this is just a general problem outside the Northeast. The cities are just too far spread apart to make high speed rail make sense. Population density just isn't there. And America is such a big country. Air travel and our airport infrastructure, which is some of the best in the world, is a much better substitute. Like, it'd probably be cheaper just to subsidize airline tickets than build out this entire railroad infrastructure that will probably be lightly used. Like, I wonder what the math would be on that. Like, if you just had a $50 discount on airline tickets sponsored by the state or something like that, or they removed airport fees on all the airports, and how would that be compared to the cost of building these railways, and for the consumer and for the taxpayer? I mean, I don't really think the government should be subsidizing airlines either, but I mean, it generally it seems like it's more effective. Like it is nice when I'm in places like Switzerland or Europe that you can take the train and it's a lot more comfortable than flying and convenient. And that the thing is that driving is especially inconvenient in those places, and the distances are just much shorter. So that's will air travel get more expensive if we can't secure Hormuz? I mean, it's for certain routes. Like if you're trying to fly from Europe to Asia or Australia, that might get more expensive. I think most American travelers will not be affected by this at all, in terms of the geopolitical, not excluding the oil price impact. I mean, air travel will get more expensive if we can't secure Hormuz because oil prices will be significantly higher. But if you're just talking about like from a safety risk of planes not willing to fly over it, I don't think that's the factor. But yeah, higher oil prices will be a factor. Um, what turned you against Fed conspiracies? It's just I don't know. It's my knowledge of how markets work is kind of. I mean, I think there are some issues with the Fed, and it's not like a benevolent institution either. But like I think that a lot of the conspiracy theories are making claims that are not substantiated. Um, the let's see, other thing is what was I gonna say? What are your thoughts on looks maxing? I think somebody asked me that. I did a whole video about looks maxing for members. I didn't want to release it to the general public because you guys would rather wanted the passport bro debunking the doomer instead, and I'm kind of done with social commentary type stuff. But here's the video I did about the economics of looks maxing, and you got if you want it, watch it. Join our members. Um, if members would get early releases for all of our videos, and for the bonus video tier, you get exclusive videos. I release maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks on the channel that are kind of too off topic for the main channel. But when it comes to looks maxing, my general view on it is I think it's cope and compensation for men feeling like they cannot compete in the dating market for historically things that men were able to compete on, whether that's being able to provide for a family, competing on personality, competing on social status, or like being a protector and showing like masculine leadership. And so that's kind of my take on that. I think it's a pearl drift type of thing, and I think I think that if you put that same energy and money and capital into improving yourself in terms of making yourself a more interesting person or improving your career prospects or education, it'll be a much higher ROI than looks maxing. Like, I mean, if you instead of spending, I don't know, $20,000 to smash your face or break your legs, you should go and travel the world for a year. And the amount of interesting stories and life experiences and lessons you learn will make you a far more interesting and appealing person than you would doing that, or try starting a business. That's the other thing. You could use that instead of putting your effort in looks max, put your effort in starting a business. Whether it's successful, you'll have a good career and ability to provide for yourself. And if you're not successful, you'll learn a lot of valuable lessons that can be translated to better job opportunities if you decide to go back into the 9 to 5 world. Here's the video about Indonesia that people asked about. Here is the video. I also did a video about Thailand. I did all these Southeast Asian videos several years ago. So if you want to know my thoughts about Thailand, some of the stuff might be outdated because I made all these videos 3 to 4 years ago. But I also did one about Singapore. and I did one about Malaysia too. So if you want all my, and there's a whole playlist called Economic Futures where I broke down over like 20 countries in this kind of fashion, that I went into these kind of breakdowns of what their economic history is, what they specialize in, and what kind of potential future they have. And I'm going to try to get you guys a link to um the whole playlist. I don't know why it's not letting me share the link to the playlist, but I'm trying to see if I did any other ones on. Oh yeah, I did one on Vietnam too. So another Southeast Asian video, the economic future of Vietnam. And then I covered most of South America in this series, most of Europe, a lot of the Middle East, and North America too. So those are kind of those are some of my favorite videos to make in retrospect, because you do a deep dive research into learning about a country's economy and what kind of potential there is, and you learn. And I like learning about international um, cultures, international economics, and finance. I just find that topic to be very interesting. And speaking of that, here's the video I was mentioning about the risk of Europe becoming a third world um, continent. What sparked the idea of making a YouTube channel? Well, I mean, what sparked the idea of making a YouTube channel was I had a lot of ideas when I was running a research business I wanted to share. My clients at the time thought they weren't actionable enough for trading. And so they're like, I had all this stuff, esoteric things I was researching relatively, and I wanted to share them some way. And so I was like, look, why not create a YouTube channel? And so I kind of used it as an outlet to share some of my more interesting, off the beaten path, but economics and financially related ideas. And that's what it became now. How do we be good Christians and still work in the workplace? Well, I'm not a theologian, but there's a book that I read that is about this very topic on this shelf. It's called Saints in the World by, I think his name is Jose Urtiaga. And it's about how you can be a saint through working your normal profession. There's a lot of groups. I know the Catholic community is very good with this, about teaching people how to integrate their faith with their professional life and their activism and their family life. And I think other real Christian traditions may have something similar. Am I a dispensationalist? I do, like, it depends what you mean, like dispensationalism. Let's just say that. Like, I probably am not, but at least by the way that I've heard that being used in modern political discourse. Um, let's see. Analyze psychology by an American lifted diesel pickup truck. I mean, I did a video about lifted trucks. I talked about this in the Pearl Drift series. I'm not going to go into the whole thing over and over again about that, but yeah, watch my video on it. Do you think that the oil price shock could be a good buying opportunity for countries that import oil heavily? Yes, but it depends on the country, because I think that good demographics are not necessarily good demographics anymore because of AI. Yes, it is. It's Jesus Urtriaga. Yeah, Saints in the World. That is the book. Um, let's see. I Let's see if there's anything else that I was going to um, answer here. What are your thoughts on predictive history? I've watched some of his videos basically on your suggestions. Like, I don't really watch. I mean, I watch other YouTube, but it's mostly in the background for me while I'm doing other things. A lot of it's music, a lot of it's random history content, and but the thing is that a lot of these more obscure, and he's not even that obscure, he's a fairly big creator, but a lot of creators, I don't really learn about them until you guys tell me about them. Or I see my Venn diagram, like when you look in your analytics, you can see who are the creators that have the most intersecting audience to yourself. And that's how I found out about Malcolm Collins and why I invited him on my show, because apparently we had the biggest Venn diagram in terms of intersecting audiences of YouTube this time last year. Um, this year, what's it called? I've heard this guy Predictive History has moved up into my intersect in the top 5 in terms of most intersecting audiences. I can understand why people who like this channel would like him, because he has a very first principles logic way of going about things, and he's willing to touch subjects that other people are not. But based on what he said about things that I know pretty well, in fact, some myself be really well informed about, like the financial system, how it works, and his take on the Catholic Church, it makes me not take him very seriously. I think he's entertaining, but and I can kind of see how his logic builds, but I think I don't really take any of his conclusions seriously. Um, he makes a lot of very strong jumps to conclusion that don't make any sense if you are very if you know anything about these subjects, like especially of what he says about the Catholic Church, particularly that irked me. Uh, but yeah, so that's what's it called? Is Martin Shkreli legit? I mean, what do you mean by legit? I mean, he had a he had a very interesting story. Let's just say that I don't want to get too into Martin Shkreli. Um, let's see. What is there? I think I missed another. Do you think that the third temple need to be rebuilt? Does Israel need to be preserved for the second country coming of Christ? I mean, it says in Revelation that the temple will be rebuilt and there will be Israel as a nation state. But I don't really like the idea that it's the job of Christians to accelerate the end times by facilitating all of this stuff. Like, maybe this is a more Catholic view on it, but like, it's not our job to predict when the end of the world is. We're never going to know. Only God knows when the revelation is going to happen. So just live your life, um, and try to be as good of a faithful believer as you can, and so that when the end times do come, that you're on the right side of the coin. Um, that's kind of my real take on that. I wouldn't get so worried about it. How do we not get caught up in the pride of life? Um, what do you mean by that? Ego? I mean, I don't know. I'm not perfect. I have an ego. So I might not be the one to ask. Um, so to be quite honest, but I mean, just recognize that like everything you can have is not permanent necessarily, and that's there's and you have to just acknowledge that, and also be around people who care about you and aren't mean, but will call you out when you're being a little bit arrogant and not logical. That's usually your loved ones, whether it's your family members or your spouse or people like that, are kind of their role to help keep you humble to a certain degree. And I think going to church is something that helps me with that, and going to mass and seeing like, and also traveling to places that are not as privileged as where I'm at also helps humble me to a certain degree too. On my Christian, yeah, I'm a practicing Roman Catholic. Um, well, I mean, a few of the big mortgage lenders were headquartered in Orange County, so that's what he is probably referring to. I think Tim Dillon has a very um, inaccurate view of Orange County. I don't think the Irvine Spectrum is like the end all and be all of Orange County, where I think that's where he was performing. Um, I mean, I have a very pro Orange County view, so um, take that with a grain of salt. I'm biased there. Thoughts on Greater Seattle area over the next 1 to 2 decades? I mean, they're trying their best to sabotage it. Like if they just would leave this whole state income tax thing alone and just be like a moderately blue state, I would be super bullish on Seattle. They have a lot of major companies like Costco, Starbucks, Amazon, Microsoft that are on the rise. They have a lot of money coming into there, a lot of skilled labor. Um, it's got it's got a relatively good environment. Water's not an issue. They have good agriculture. There's a lot of good fundamentals, but they're trying to ruin it by passing all these taxes and driving people out. It could have been like the blue Texas, where people who don't want to deal with the high taxes of other states but still have more progressive values could go to and resettle. And they're at risk of throwing that away. So that's kind of my take. I think Seattle has a lot of potential. I would have put it and they're just kind of, this is the problem. It's something I think I talked about this in the live stream. It's the prosperity theory of politics, where basically the more prosperous a city becomes, more likely than not, they elect politics that is self-sabotaging and allows for entropy because they feel like, oh, we're successful, we can handle it. And then they keep doing that until they kill the golden goose and then things get bad enough so things can reform. And this is something I think about a lot, is how can you what's it called? How can you stop this endless cycle of sabotaging your stuff and then just spending the next few decades unwinding it and then going in a circle over and over again? It's really frustrating as an American who cares about the future of a country and somebody of a state who has gone through this cycle multiple times. Um, yes, you are required to pay income tax. I mean, if you're not a fan of the 16th Amendment, I understand. I'm not really either, but it was a legal constitutional amendment. I've seen America Freedom to Fascism, and yeah, their argument doesn't really hold water on that. Um, Ever thought about doing a breakdown of religion and wealth attainment? I've thought about it, but I think the problem with me going there is that um, it's it's a topic that I have to be very careful with how I approach it. Let's just say that, because it can be easily misinterpreted in ways I really don't want it to be misinterpreted. And a lot of the data is inconclusive. There's wealthy people in pretty much every major religion. Um, let's see. Do you think American exceptionalism is truly over? Over the next 40 years of investing? No, I don't think American exceptionalism is truly over. Um, that doesn't mean it doesn't make sense to invest internationally, internationally diversify. I did a whole video about the case for international investing about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, April 6th of last year, where I go into more of that. So, but nevertheless, I think America is more in its teenage phase, like, than its death phase. Like, if I had to put a historical analogy, we are the US right before Caesar, like end of the Republic, not Rome at the end of the empire in 476. So if I had to put us on the timeline, we're probably somewhere in like 100 to 60 BC. If you want a historical comparison versus like 400 AD, when there's a long way to go for a collapse. Um, Yeah, I mean, of course they're going to say that. Like people who have an anti-Trump view are going to, or anti whoever's in power view, because there's a lot of right wingers who will say it's the end of America if the Democrats get elected too. That's just normal partisan things, and also maybe the old liberal international order has to be reformed. Like I think the current system is broken. A lot of the post World War II institutions have become outdated, but again, like the example is like the replacement of the Roman Empire Republic with the Roman Empire. Sure, you had the decline of the great power, but it was replaced by the same land and the same people, but under a new way of managing it. Like, I think that's the bigger risk, is that we don't necessarily lose America as the world power, but we lose America as a actual, like, representative elective democracy. Do you think America can avoid the consequences of disrupting the world through its foreign policy, my isolation, and countries never seeking revenge? Hmm, I'd have to think about that one, honestly. And I already answered my thoughts on Professor of the professor in China and his game theory. Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, again, you could, like, just because he thought the Iran war was going to happen way before it actually did. So I don't even think he was that right about that one either. But I mean, I think a lot of people like him because there's a lot of people who naturally want to believe in the conspiratorial worldview, and he gives them red meat. And also, he provides a very educated and erudite sounding view to justify not just conspiracy views, but general anti American worldview and anti Catholic Church worldview and anti a lot of other institutions that people generally do not like. Um, Thoughts on opening a business and working with friends and mixing family? Well, it depends on the type of business you want to do, honestly, and whether they are actually qualified to help you do it or not. And I mean, I've started a business with the friends of mine, and it's worked sometimes and it doesn't work sometimes. It depends on a lot of different variables. There's no real yes or no to that question. Um, yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap things up here. I'm starting to lose my voice, and I have an early morning tomorrow because I got to get up to drive to Fresno. But thank you guys all for watching. I look forward to seeing you guys at the meetups if you're going to be there in person, and keep supporting the channel. And have a good night. Thank you to all of you.